Yeah, we're live. I'm happy to do this on my phone. For some reason, the YouTube is not allowing me to. What are you doing, Bruno? YouTube's not allowing me to. It's not showing the recognizing the camera on any of the computers. So I'm doing this with my phone. So hopefully the audio is still okay. Might be a little bit of a echo in this room. But today I want to talk about nitrous and specifically nitrous on 351 Windsor. So in my opinion, I haven't done enough 351 Windsor testing. I mean, I was a 5-liter Mustang. I had a 5-liter Mustang, had it for years and years and years, and did lots and lots of stuff with it. Love the car. Ran the Silver State. It's a notch, like I think they should be. But I do love a hatchback. They're more aerodynamic. And I had a 65 going back. I had a 65 K coupe. 4-speed pony interior, all that stuff. And loved it and said, okay, Mustang should have trunks. But then, I look at a GT350 and I'm like, yeah, that's probably better. I like those better. But I have a notch, did lots of 5-liter stuff, but I haven't done as much 351 stuff. And I think the 351 stuff is a good way to go. It's a better way to go than a 302 because it's bigger. The problem that it has, putting it in a Fox chassis or other things sometimes, is hood clearance. The deck height is taller on it. But because it's 50 cubic inches or so bigger, it just makes more torque, it makes more power, it does everything better. In the factory applications, like in the trucks, they were obviously kind of limited and they were designed for low speed torque. They had long runner intake manifolds. They shared the same kind of weak, low flowing, and guys want to call them torque producing cylinder heads, but the reality is that's not the case. I mean, just because they're small runners doesn't mean that they enhance torque production. Almost every cylinder head test that I did, and I tested in one group or one sections of groups, I did 4 of them. I tested 25 or 30 different cylinder heads. And every time that I tested another cylinder head, I think we loaded these things all the way down at 2,000 or 2,500 or something. I don't ever remember seeing the smaller stock heads make more torque down low. So that's just not the case. It's a common misconception with people that, oh yeah, these small ports, they make good velocity and they make lots of torque. Not if they don't flow, and those don't. But the 351, unfortunately, more saddled by those than the 302 because it wants to make more power and has the same amount of flow, so it limits it, and then they have the long runner intake manifolds and stuff too. But the nice thing about the 351s is they have lots of potential. They just have really, really mild camshafts in them. Actually, and I didn't do this test, and looking back through the data, this is one of the things that I like about going back and looking at the data. I mean, I've run thousands and thousands of tests. But I find new stuff when I go back and look at it all the time. This is a perfect example. So I went back to look at the data on the 351. I'm like, okay, I want to do a discussion about nitrous today. We're going to look at 351s. I've got a stock 351, and then I have a much wilder 408 stroker combination. I ran nitrous on both of those. I'm going to talk about both of those. And then I started looking at the power gains on the 351 Windsor, and I thought, you know what? I have never tested one of these and put a stock 5-liter HO hydraulic roller cam in a truck 351. And I wonder how much of a gain we would get from that, because I think that truck, I think the truck cam in the hydraulic roller stuff, the 94 and up, I think that the hydraulic roller cam in the truck is different than it is in the Mustang. So if you guys know, Mustang guys out there, particularly Mark Sanchez, if you happen to be watching, let me know if the truck cam is milder than the HO cam that's in the Mustang. I think that it is. And so I just wonder what kind of gain we would get in the trucks, in a truck motor, if we just kept all the fuel injection and everything on there. And that's the other thing that I want to do, is I want to run the truck intake manifold. I also want to run that on a 302, so I plan on doing that. So please keep reminding me, Richard, run the truck 5-liter HO stuff, run the truck manifolds, and then do it also on a 351. But what we did on this 351 is I ran a stock one. We went and got a stock one from the wrecking yard. It happened to be a flat tapped version. It was a 93. It came out of the wrecking yard. We took the fuel injection off of it. I put a dual plane intake manifold on it, put a 650 carburetor, we put headers on it, and then ran it the way that we got it from the wrecking yard. Stock rockers and cams, all of that stuff. just ran it with an electric water pump the way that we do, and that motor, run naturally aspirated, produced 268 horsepower. See what I'm talking about? It made essentially the same power as an HO302 does when we run it in the same configuration. So it makes about the same peak power as a 5-liter Ford does, but 338 foot-pounds of torque. So it makes more torque than the 302 does, which we would expect because it's bigger. But really, what this thing needs is equal or more camshaft. So we ran this thing stock, 268 horsepower at a whopping 4,700 RPM, which shows you this is not a high RPM piece. Certainly the camshaft. The dual plane will allow it to make power much higher if we had more camshaft in it, but it's not doing that. And the 338 foot-pounds happened at 3,600 RPM. So what we did then is add a simple plate nitrous system. This was a Zexbrunner plate. They'll all work like this. And we ran it first with jets. We ran a 63 nitrous jet and a 53 fuel jet to get the air fuel dialed in. And then what we do is before we run this, we all listen to Steve Brule and do his procedure. So what we do is we flow the fuel using a flow orifice so that we know when we're setting the fuel pressure to feed the nitrous solenoid or to feed the fuel solenoid on the nitrous kit. We have a flow orifice that we use so that we know when we are adjusting the pressure going to that solenoid that we get that pressure not just as a deadhead, but in a flowing situation. So that's the fuel pressure that it gets while that it's activated. So that works really well to optimize the air fuel. And then we put the 63 fuel jet in it. We heat the bottle up to about 92 degrees or so. We can check the pressure on it. It's going to be 1,000 plus PSI. And then that way, when we hit the nitrous, we obviously check the solenoids, make sure that they're both working, we purge the system just a little bit, and then make a run and hit the nitrous wherever we want it. Because this thing is such a low RPM motor, I mean, it made peak power at 4,700, where you engage the nitrous, if you add 100 shot, but you do it at 2,000 RPM, you get way more torque. I don't recommend doing that at 2,000 RPM, but you can. Versus hitting it at 4,000 or 5,000 or 6,000 RPM, you get the same horsepower gain. It's just that you get a whole bunch more torque. So we ran this with the 63-53 jet setup, and this thing made 391 horsepower and 500 foot-pounds of torque, 501 foot-pounds of torque. The thing about this and both of these combinations, and I'll talk about this, unfortunately you guys don't get to see it, but the reason that I like this, two reasons. One, there were 351s, so that's awesome already. But when we did these nitrous tests, this is one of the examples where the tune was basically spot on. We did pull 4 degrees on this thing. We ran it on pump gas, but the nitrous curve mirrored exactly the NA power curve. So it didn't fall off. The bottle pressure didn't go away. The air fuel didn't get weird. This was like 11.8. And so the curve just mirrored each other in the same way that boost usually does. It worked out great. It worked out great on the 351. Then we stepped up to a 72 nitrous jet and a 63 fuel jet, because if you're adding more nitrous, you gotta add more fuel. And then that pushed power up from 391 horsepower to 420 horsepower and 520 foot-pounds, 419.8 and 520 foot-pounds of torque. Again, the gain, nice and consistent all the way through the RPM range. The power curve of the nitrous just nice and flat and straight, exactly like the factory curve was. It was this is one of the times that everything worked out great, partially due to proper preparation, and the system worked good. So the next motor is a much larger, it's a 351 Windsor based motor. We use a 351 Windsor based, or a 351 Windsor block. It was a hydraulic roller block. We put a good sized camshaft in this thing. It was a trick flow camshaft. It was 595 lift. It was a 250-254 degree duration split, 110 degree lobe separation angle. This thing had flat top pistons. It had trick flow 205 heads, so very good cylinder heads. It had a trick flow single plane high rise intake manifold, a 950 XP carburetor, long tube headers, and this thing did very well. It was fairly high compression given the chamber size and the displacement and the fact that it had a flat top piston. This thing made 601 horsepower at 6,700 RPM, good sized camshaft, good flowing heads, single plane intake, wants to make power at the top. and 533 foot-pounds at 5,100 RPM. And just like with the nitrous setup on the, basically stock 351 Windsor, the nitrous on this thing worked perfect. We set this thing up with a perimeter plate, just like we did with the 351. Again, you can use Holly, all of the Nitrous Express, all the different nitrous guys. And we put jetting in here for this thing to make, I think we were trying to make 150 or 200 horsepower. And we did almost that. With a nitrous, this thing made 789 horsepower and 692 foot-pounds of torque. And again, just like with the 351, the power curve was perfect. I mean, it was just perfectly smooth. Just followed the factory power curve exactly all the way out till we laid on this thing essentially until we had the peak power. And again, another example where the nitrous worked great. And I know a lot of guys want to talk about, oh, did the perimeter plate do that? Better distribution, all that stuff. We've seen this from spray bars and plates and all kinds of different things. The big thing for us is making sure that you have the right amount of air fuel versus nitrous, and then you have adjusted the timing, and then you have the right amount of fuel flow. Because a lot of times what happens is when you run the nitrous, if the nitrous flow rate is falling off, that means that you don't have a 100 shot or 150 shot or 200 shot. And so if the nitrous falls off, the power is going to fall off. If the fuel flow goes up or the nitrous falls off, the air fuel will also get rich. So that's going to hurt it even more. So making sure that part of it is all right, that's gonna work out really well. So this nitrous thing worked out great. Both 351s, a stock one and a, from mild to wild kind of thing, nitrous worked great on both of them. And, like with the stock one, all of a sudden you have a 400 horsepower and 500 foot-pound 351 just adding nitrous to kind of a stock motor. If it were me, I'd definitely put a cam, and I would be hard-pressed not to put cylinder heads on this thing. Really, if I was going to get a 351 like this from the wrecking yard, we wanted a stock one purposely. But if I was going to get a 351 to do a build-up, one, I'd get a hydraulic roller. Two, I would go find an Explorer and get the GT40 heads on it, put those on it. And that way you have a kind of a lightning build, a low buck lightning build, and that probably would be a better way to go. So we'll see what you guys got going on. See what our chat bots are doing. Here we go. I'm scrolling. Fling, Josh, Willie. Is there any way you can test air velocity going through the intake at certain RPMs depending on cam size? Well, why are you looking at air velocity through the intake? We can take an airflow reading because we have an air hat that we can do, but I guess you could calculate velocity, but I don't know what you're trying to look at there. Getting nitrous where I'm at is not easy. You have to get a big bottle. Yeah, Westech has a fill bottle. Could I direct message you somewhere for your thoughts on what cam I should use on my 351? I don't know what you mean by thoughts, but you can ask here. If you tell us, there's a lot of smart people here, so if you tell us what your combination is, we can tell you what kind of camshaft might work for your combination. Go to switch over to live chat. Pontiacs, yep, that's good. I know I'm excited about getting down to Westech, and then I want to run the 350 and I want to run the Trophy 4-cylinder. I've been wanting to put that torque storm on there for a long time. For a long, long time. I'm wondering what's going on with, why do you keep coming in here? Puppies. Bruno. Bruno. What are you doing? Milo, what are you doing over there? Hello. I know, I'm excited about that. I just need to put on the Pontiac 350, I just need to do a spring upgrade on it so I can put, I have a couple of cams. I have an Elgin Ram Air 3 cam, I guess, and maybe a Ram Air 4 cam. So I'd like to try those and see what happens with power. Right now it's got some kind of stock cam in it. I won't really know until I take it out. I don't know how I'll recognize it. Maybe it'll have some factory numbers on it or something, but I'll try to see what that is and get on here with some Pontiac experts to figure that out. Like I said, I've wanted to do an HO version of that to find some heads that I can make work, and that would be kind of cool. And then definitely run, because it will bolt on, definitely run it on the Trophy 4-cylinder. I have lots of weird testing I want to do with the Trophy 4-cylinder too. I've got single plane intake manifolds from the Speedmaster guys. I've got aluminum heads for the Pontiac. Will you ever do cams on testing on LT4? Which one? The Gen 2 or the Gen 5? Because there's both. Probably not on a Gen 2 because it's so specialized. I had some LT4 heads, but I sold those. And I think the guys from Brian Tooley Racing have done LT4 heads on, I mean, not LT4s, but LT4 testing on the LT4 Gen 5 motor. So I think that they have testing with that blower motor. So that would be cool to try the factory blower and stuff, because I think that that will work pretty well. I'd like to see, I think that they tried some different camshafts. They might have even tried some, ported head stuff on there. So I'd kind of like to see what happens. I'd definitely like to see what's going on with head flow on that, because it's interesting in that particular combination, you have a lot of head flow, but limited blower size. Uh-oh, shoveling snow. I have LT4 heads on my 95 LT1. Yeah, that's a pretty common upgrade. I think you have to do the intake manifold right on that too. Are the ports? The ports are different on those LT4 heads than they are on the LT1 stuff, right? I know when I flow tested them, the LT4 heads definitely flowed more. LT4 race heads. Those were the big boy heads. Change the intake manifold. So did you put an LT4 intake manifold on it? Did the aftermarket make any LT4 intake manifolds? Did Edelbrock? I know Edelbrock had some LT1 intake manifolds, but did they do it for an LT4 also? And did GM or anybody do single planes and dual planes for those? I would have thought they would, but the LT4 was made in such small numbers that I don't know if they would have wanted. I got a ported LT4 intake. What did they port on an LT4 intake? Did they just port the runner size, which is very, very short, and do they port the opening size of the entries, like maybe so you can put an oval throttle body on there or something? I know that you can put dual 52 and dual 58 millimeter throttle bodies on there, but I've seen, like, the guys from Kenny Bell had guys that offered oval ones. Do a retune after the Eaton supercharger. You'll definitely need to tune it if you put an Eaton supercharger on there, if that's your question. Yeah, you'll have to retune after you do a supercharger. I'm trying to find the wide open single throttle body for it. Yeah. I forgot who made those. Did TPIS do those? I know that they had the big throttle bodies. Stock bottom end, 11R 205 heads, dual plane, Holly Sniper, willing to fly cut the pistons, wanting to keep the RPMs under 6,200. If it's a 351, that 274 Extreme Energy 274 cam works really well. You could go a step bigger than that, depending on how you want your drivability. Klingenfelter tested the throttle body. Yeah, they've done a lot of testing. They're good guys. I'm supposed to go back with them and do some stuff on their 427. I need to call them, as a matter of fact. I could do some videos on it because they've got a 427 LT motor, which is pretty cool. That should help make some power. We like that. Like big stroke or stuff. It's so much easier to make more torque. Like we were talking about the 302, the 351. You know, yeah, you got more stroke. You got more displacement. You got more power everywhere. That's nothing but good. Interestingly enough, on the 351 and the 408, we ran the same headers on both of those. And after our header discussion yesterday, I'm thinking that a 600 horsepower 408 stroker 351 base motor probably would want something more than 1 3/4 headers. I'd like to try something bigger on it just to see what it does. I mean, I don't expect huge gains, but it would just be a nice other header test. Because with lots of camshaft and a decent amount of RPM, it would be interesting to see if the 1 7/8 headers, you know, a step header or something would be better. Which aftermarket company is making the best hydraulic lifters? I don't know. Most guys go with the LS7 lifters. The guys from Brian Tooley have some good lifter choices there. Don't buy cheap stuff. Don't buy Amazon stuff. Probably don't buy eBay stuff. I run 1 5/8 on my D-port Pontiacs. The round ports get 2 inches. You know who has good cams is I'm trying to think of the name. Not Schneider, not Lenati, not Comp, not Crane. Not that they don't too, but who is Alex Taylor sponsored by? I'm having a hard time thinking of their name. Somebody let me know. Rhodes Lifters, yeah, it's not Crower either. I think it starts with an S. I don't know why I have a hard time thinking of it. Iski, not S, not an S. Iski is who I'm thinking of. They have good lifters. But I don't know, I haven't ever used their LS lifters though. But we have used their big block stuff. And that works good. Most guys use the LS7 lifters. Honestly, the lifters that I use most often are the ones that came out of the motors when we get them from the wrecking yard. And we've run lots of RPM with those and not had any problem with them. Of course, we're not concerned about them making noise either because we don't hear that with open headers on the engine dyno. We don't have it in a car where we're driving around or things are kind of quiet. Although I do tend to run mufflers, but still there's a lot of noises there. Cam and the heads are junk on the motor that you got. Uh-oh. I've got a lot of stock cams down at West Tech too. I could bring those home. Get those back. Been going roller with the last 4 engines I've done. It's $1,000 more than flat taps, but I don't have cams going bad. Yeah, for a lot of people, you know, just the assurance that that's not going to happen is nice because you don't putting a motor on the dyno and having the cam go bad. You got to take the whole thing apart. Can you use old roller lifters on a new cam? Yes, we do that all the time. Like I said, whenever on this junkyard motor, in fact, all the junkyard motors that I've run, we swap the cam. We don't do anything with lifters. The lifters are the same. I got some old solid lifter small block Chevy cams from a dragster. When we take flat tappet lifters out, either solids or hydraulics, we put them back in a lifter box and then mark them front, and so that we know where they go, and we tape that box to the camshaft and set it up at West Tech. You've never had the Pontiac cams go bad from Summit? That's good. That's good news. We do a lot of prep work before we on the cams and lifters before we on the flat tap and stuff. And we're nice on the spring rates when we do that. Always match the lifters to the cam lobe. Yeah, we just keep them in order so that they go back in. And for us, a lot of times we've run on the dyno and maybe it has 6 or 8 or 10 runs or whatever, and then it comes out to change to a different camshaft. Quite honestly, you can put any lifter anywhere on any of the cams on those, because the cam and lifters don't really have they don't have a wear pattern in them yet. So you could mix and match them and it wouldn't be a problem. In fact, that might be a good video to do. Just take them out and just randomly put them back in and see what happens. Because I think people erroneously think that it immediately goes bad. And that's not the case. But when I do lifters, if we ever take lifters out of an LS, we don't care where they go, which one they go back in. There's none of that. Do we just put them back in? And a lot of guys wonder about orienting. If you look at the lifter, it has a bleed hole in it. About orienting those, I've never done that either. Some guys like to at least have them all aimed in one direction or the other direction. They want to know which direction is best. Just random, basically. If you've got OCD, then at least you'd make them all the same. What would you say is a healthy power goal for a 96 4.6 Cobra crankshaft? I'm thinking of 500 wheel horsepower. You won't break a Cobra crank. You could do twice that much or 3 times that much and you won't break the Cobra crank. It's very, very strong. That's the least of your worries in that motor. That's a steel 8-bolt crank, so it's fine. You wouldn't even break a cast crank at that power level. Thumper, you use link bar stuff on your Pontiac? Yeah, that's pretty common. Because they don't have that way, you don't have really trays on that to guide them. The link bars keep them oriented properly. The link bar stuff works. You just have to make sure that it's not hitting on stuff. I've run across that on some blocks, particularly aftermarket Ford blocks, where when you try to put link bars in there, the ones closest to the china wall, the front or the back walls, sometimes there's some interference there with the link bar, and you just have to grind that out. The problem is finding out about that as you're assembling the motor. If you've got everything else together, you got the pistons, rods, and everything in there, and you put the cam in and you're putting the lifters in, and you're like, oh yeah, that's not going to fit. That's why a lot of times a full mock-up is necessary before full assembly to find those things out, especially when you change something. If you change the block, that's changed, and so now what happens? What happens with does the intake fit when you put the heads on? All of that stuff, that one change can throw a lot of stuff off. So it's a good idea to keep that in mind when you're assembling, because not that we haven't done this, but it's not a good idea to be grinding on the block when the engine is all assembled. For a junkyard motor, just cover most of the stuff. A lot of times if I'm grinding on something, I'll have somebody stand there with a vacuum while I'm grinding on something. And so it'll just grab all the shavings. And then we clean it really good, vacuum it out, blow it out, and then run it. And I haven't had problems with that, but it's not the recommended procedure. Much better to do all that stuff ahead of time, clean everything, tap all the bolt holes if you want to do all that stuff, and then put it together. Want to put a 4250 stroke crank and a 400, you had to do some clearancing. Yep, that's pretty normal. 383 Chevys are the same way. If you try to put a 4-inch stroke in a small block Chevy, guys want to make a 427 or I don't know, what's the 4-inch crank going to be? Not with a 4-inch bore though, right? What would that be? 383 would be a 370. So there'd be a 408, yeah. So, but if you do that, the problem is that a lot of times the rod bolts will hit the camshaft. And that can become a problem. Small big circle cams are sometimes the deal. You know, rods or clearance, or just not using a 4-inch stroke crank in there. You can make a 427 if you put a 4-inch stroke crank on a 4125 bore block. Aftermarket stuff's a lot easier because then they've done all that stuff for you. We built a 427 before, and it took a lot. It took a lot of stuff. And then the small base circle cam, then you got to worry about the lifter oiling, and then the push rod length's going to change. And, you know, like I said, it's one change that now has changed all of the other things, because all of those things are interrelated. And it's just a lot of times both time consuming, and a lot of times it's more money too. So you got to think about that. So I can't put a poll up, but we can ask what is a 11.5 to 1 nitrous 600 horsepower 408. Is that a daily driver combination? Someday I'll build a 495. You'll need a tall deck block to do that. Or I should say it's a lot easier with a tall deck block. You can sleeve a factory aluminum block. We've done 468s with those. Pontiacs have plenty of room between the rods and the cam. Yeah. Small blocks though are pretty tight. Have you looked into the dimple piston? Yeah, they contacted me and asked me if I wanted to test it. I told them that I would. I told them that it probably would be better to have somebody like Ben Schrader maybe over at EFI University to test it. He's got more data acquisition and stuff at his place, and I'd like to see what they do. I'd like to see what the results are, to see if there's a change. I'm wondering, and the problem is that it's a fairly involved test, because you have to do a piston swap. So are you changing the weight of the piston, or changing the design has to be exactly the same other than the dimples. Otherwise you're changing the design of the piston. And so you have to have two identical motors, or you have to take that motor apart and make sure that the balance is the same with the new pistons that you put in. You have to do a piston swap, and then you have to reuse the rings from the dimple piston test. It's a real thing. I mean, it's a fairly involved test. And then you have to make sure that in whatever configuration you ran it in is perfectly repeatable. Because what if you're looking at onesies and twosies, and then you put it in with a new piston and then run it again? And then is it something? Is it nothing? Does it help with? Does it change air fuel? Does it change the brake specific number? Could it possibly change fuel mileage, which is going to be a hard thing to measure on the engine dyno? I mean, I guess you could do a steady state cruise kind of thing. I just don't know how you do that accurately, other than actually doing it out in the real world. Yeah, Eric, hope you're feeling better, man. I know that they're saying that the diesel guys are saying that it's working. So, but I'd like to see the test data. I think it's cool stuff. I like when people try new stuff. That's great. 45 is greater than 23. I'm sure that that's the number of people here and the number of likes. Get those likes up. What is your doggy doing over there? Huh? What's your brother doing? You go get him. You go get him. He's barking at squirrels. Huh. Go get the squirrel. Uh-oh. The army man crawl in front. Go get him. Go get him. Go see what you have to protect him. What if it's a big squirrel? Bruno, go get him. He's in attack mode. Well, puppy attack mode. 700 for trans, will 4.8 or 5.3 better for transmission life? How you drive it is the thing that's going to determine transmission life. Less power for a 700 R4 would be better if they're just going to be stock. But, are you doing high RPM shifts? My dog heard you say squirrel. That's all you have to say. That's a universal dog language. So the abuse on the transmission is somewhat related to the engine, but mostly driver. Doing neutral drops and stuff in it, probably not a good idea. It's amazing how much it can cost to get the transmission right, to harness all the power that you can make. The power part of it seems pretty easy. You gotta put a turbo on almost anything and get the air, fuel, and timing right, and you know, all of a sudden you're 50 or 100% power gain. That's a lot. It's hard to get that kind of stuff with, you know, NA power gains. We don't see that very often. Even if you take this fairly mild 351 Windsor, we were more than able to double the power output, but we had to change everything. We had to change the displacement, the compression, the cylinder heads, the camshaft, the intake manifold, the carburetor. The header stayed the same. So it took a lot to get from 268 horsepower to 601. So we more than doubled it. It just takes boost to do that. Boost in a cam works really good though, because then you get easier gains. But it'd be interesting to see what the, you know, guys would want to see the cost of stuff like that. Well, what's the cost of all that? And it's not cheap to do a stroker motor with CNC trick flow heads and a trick flow intake manifold and 950 XP and that camshaft and lifters and rockers and all the stuff that went along with it. That route would definitely be more expensive than a turbo would be. And like that 351, 268 horsepower, that's not even what a 4.8 makes. Or stock 4.8 or a stock 5.3. So you can see how, you know, you can see the appeal of putting an LS in something when you're starting off with, well, if you put a 5.3 in there, it's almost 100 horsepower. It's about 80 or 85. And then just hit it with nitrous. Exactly. That helps a lot. But nitrous with a 72 jet puts you about where a canned 5.3 is. So I'm not in your way, am I? Used to run around 69 Z28, 12.5 to 1. Nice. And a 200 shot, that'd be a lot. Hello. Bruno's hiding under here. Hello. Hiding under the desk, huh? A 200 shot on a DZ302 would be a lot. That's a big percentage of the factory power output. But I remember having nitrous on my Mustang, on my 5-liter Mustang, and it felt like a really big difference going from a, you know, at that time it was essentially a stock motor with, I don't even remember, we didn't even have exhaust or anything on it. I think it just had a K&N on there. It might have had headers on it. Headers and maybe underdrive pulleys or something small, but then a 75 shot made a big difference. It was a big deal back then, relatively speaking, as long as you're racing other stock stuff. Get away, what's going on? So who's snoring? Is that Milo or is that Bruno? 13 to 1, 455. That's a lot. Pontiac. 13 is low. Oh, for E85, no, that's good. That's the nice thing about having an E85 available. If you have that, E85 with that high compression stuff is good. It really likes that. We build excitement, that's right. A lot of the Pontiac stuff was cool. I know I stole a bunch of suspension stuff off the Trans Ams when I had my Camaro. WS6, all that stuff. Big sway bars. Springs. So you build it with high compression to get good fuel mileage with your 455 running 85. I'm sure that gets really good fuel mileage. I'm sure that that might get into double digits. Yeah, the WS6 stuff worked good. We went and got the big block springs that or the WS6 stuff. That car had a 400 and I think that we took it out of. If I remember right, I don't think it was a 455. It might have been, because you could find those back in the day when we did this. And we got the sway bars, the springs. We took the rear leaf springs. We took the rear sway bar. I think that was it. But we cut the front springs. We cut the front coil springs. I have to put a different cam on my motor. It fell on the floor. Uh-oh, did it dent the cam? You don't want to, if you drop a camshaft, you usually hit something important, like one of the cam journals, which is not good. Then it'll go in and destroy a cam bearing. I mean, I suppose you could polish it, it probably would still work. Am I good to put another used cam in it? Yeah, you can. I've run the stock cams from LM7s and stuff. We've taken those out and interchanged them between all kinds of different motors because we usually use that cam as a baseline for our testing. So it just, even though it has a lot of those cams, especially the LR4s and LM7s, usually have a wear pattern. It's almost a groove from the roller lifters in it, and it's fine. With the hydraulic roller stuff, all that stuff is pretty interchangeable. You're not gonna have a problem with it. All I do when I'm doing cam swaps is, I've had a lot of people comment about this in the videos. They're like, you didn't put oil in it, you didn't put pre-lube the cam or whatever. It's like, I always put oil in it before we put it in. You may not see that in the video or whatever. I said, but I don't put a dry cam in there. I would be more worried about, I wouldn't care about because the lifters already have oil on them. I'm not really worried about the lobes. I would be more worried about a dry grabbing the cam bearing. So a dry journal is not good. Even though the bearing already has oil on it, I just would feel better that they both have oil on it, because as you slide it in there, it's a fairly tight fit and it's kind of squeegees a lot of the oil off. But that's why, when I'm doing assembly, I have my little wipey stick, so it's a length of, you could use a coat hanger. I use, because it was there, we use welding rod, and I just bend the end of it and wrap up a rag, dip the rag in oil, and then slide the rag in, and then put oil on all of the cam bearings before I put the camshaft in. I don't just put it on the cam and then put it in. Like I said, I like to make sure that both the surfaces have that. And then I put all the lifters go in a salad bowl of oil. Before I put those in, on flat tap and stuff, I put the assembly lube on all of we put oil on the journals, but assembly lube on all of the lobes, and then assembly lube on the bottom of the lifter, and then zinc the heck out of everything. But on the hydraulic roller stuff, it's it's basically ready to go. I don't know what you mean by thoughts. And I wouldn't know what a Rebel kit is anyways. I don't know what that is. I'm getting ready to test some Phytech stuff. I think it's their tri-power thing. Aaron, what's going on? I'm going down. I'm working on the Magnum when I go down. 360 is going to get put back together with new springs and a cam and the stock kegger. Getting it ready for boost for a little GT45 turbo. I can't remember what that thing made now. I should still have my contact information. Hit me up when you start working on it if you have any questions about the springs. Yeah, I think I've got the 2.2 the retainers. What keepers do you use on those? Do you use the 2.2 stuff or do you use the Magnum stuff? I don't know. Do those have the same valve stem diameter? It was a plate system from the local speed shop. The guy swore it was a 200 horsepower shop. That's a lot for a motor that makes 355 horsepower. You can do that. I mean, I've seen guys do that. It's just a lot. I'm just saying, relatively speaking, to the, based on the NA power output, the percentage of nitrous that you add, because there's not a lot of excess head flow. Stock Magnum keepers are fine. Okay, cool, that'll work. Same valve stem. Wow, they need smaller valve stems. We need to put the little 8mm LS valves in that 2.2. Do I have any experience with Phytech products? I've never run any of their things that I can remember. I think the guys at Westech have, but I don't think I've personally tested any of their stuff. I think I talked to those guys at MPMC, and I think that I was enamored of their, they have a tri-power setup, like 3 2s. I think it's for an LS application, if I remember right. And I think that they sent that out so I can try it on one of the LS motors, which would be cool, just because it's neat looking. I mean, test fit them with the valve stem. Let's see. First, with no springs, make sure that the lock is not protruding below the retainer. Some of the stock locks do quite a bit. Okay. I've had a mean street on my 65 GTO since 2016. Is that a Phytech thing? I'm not familiar with all of the things. Is the tunnel ram on a Pontiac? It's got to be, right, because you're the Pontiac guy. There's no poll because I'm doing this on my phone, so I can't do a poll. 200 shot going on a 5.7. All right, fingers crossed. 505 Pontiac getting a 671. Okay. Yeah, the 200 shot on the LS motor will probably be okay. I put good gas in it and take timing out of it. And we've run, bigger shots than that on wrecking yard motors. We ended up breaking one at 300 with a 300 shot. Actually, we just took the jets out, and that's as much as it would flow. Oh, it's a Gen 5 454. Okay. A 200 shot on a... That's a 310 horsepower motor or so. I think the Gen 5s that I've run with carburetors on them, the stock ones. But if it's got a cam, and obviously it's going to make more than that. They do pretty well. Peanut port heads and all. So how much do we think let's see. Richard, you ask any questions on camper 413? I don't know what you're doing with it, Danny. I don't have any experience with the 413. I can just tell you based on it being a 400-inch motor or something. 230 horsepower factory, yeah, stock, okay. You have a single plane and an 850 on it? It's an interesting combination. What's the benefit of a 55 millimeter cam versus a stock one? Well, you'd have to change a lot of stuff to make that journal size work. I don't know why you do that. They're just trying to slow the cam speed down. No clue if that's what he said. Got to beat my buddy's Camaro. Your 2.2 should already have 312 valve stems, so it's already a 560 or an 8 millimeter. Oh, okay. Is an LS a 7 millimeter? Is that what it is? Just needs lightweight valves. Do you need to get up? Okay, go. He's on it. Try to hit the guys with aces. I've seen some of their stuff. You can't just keep coming and going, huh? Come on. Get up. No? Okay. You can stay there then. Yeah, I think when we run the Gen 5 454 with the flat tappet cam and the peanut port heads and low compression, that thing made, I think when we ran it, made 300 or so, 310 horsepower. And the, might have been 320 or 330. I have to go back and look. It was in the low 300s. And then the Gen 6 made 375 or so. Better head, higher compression, hydraulic roller cam, better intake manifold. But even when we run it with a dual plane, it's kind of right there. So we got 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes. Sean, what's up? The answer is add boost. Always add boost. You have a roller bearing cam? There's no pull, Edward. I'm doing this on my phone. People should not be looking at roller bearing camshafts. Not for 99.9% of you. Particularly on LS motors. There's no reason for that. Just add boost. That's a nice thing. Did you get a Butler block for that? That's kind of cool. Gen 6 is getting a Comp 421 cam with the rocker conversion. When we ran the Gen 6, I ran those cheap like investment cast Comp roller rockers. And they were good. I mean, we don't have a lot of spring rate on that thing. It's obviously not running a lot of RPM, and those have to be better than the factory stamped steel rockers. So it's, I thought that those were kind of a good upgrade on that little Gen 6, which, by the way, I need to do the big bang on that. That needs to happen. 1 more minute. It's time to bounce. You need music. I agree. It's important. I put a supercharger on my 6-liter Caprice. I want a cam that's very mild, easy to drive. Do you have better recommendations than the LS9? Yeah, there are a lot better camshafts than that. Do you like the way that that one drives? The LS9 is going to have good idle quality and stuff. It's just not going to be making very much low-speed power. So a Super Coupe engine for sale. Oh, cool. 505. Nice. 505, 505. You want a stock idle? I don't know. I'd have to check and see what else would be a. I could look at some of those small crane cams and see those are going to have stock idle quality like 19 or 20 or something inches of idle vacuum, and those should be better than an LS9 cam. But I'll have to take a look. I don't think I would put a Truck Norris or one of these bigger cams. I mean, it'd make a lot more power, but it's not going to idle like that. We have a fresh 5.7 Hemi stroker going together. That's cool. Coolio. I have a 6-liter Hemi block if anybody's interested in that. Not a 6-liter, a 6.1. I'm thinking LS stuff. And some aluminum Hemi heads too, some aftermarket heads. So if you're a 5.7 Hemi guy and you're looking for that stuff, let me know. You don't know what car it's in? You can't just walk out there and look. Everything under 7 liters. Oh, you need a 6.1 crank? Yeah, I don't have any of those. This is just a block. But I think it has ARP main studs in it too. My neighbor told me it's harder to put a 4-inch crank in an aluminum block than it is an iron block. I don't know. I don't know if there's a difference in sleeve length. Would that be the thing that you're concerned about? But none of it's hard. You just put it in there and see if it needs to be clearance, and then you just clearance it. It takes minutes with a Dremel. It's not hard at all. And you're only going to do it down at the. You're only going to be doing it down at the bottom. 2 6-liter blocks for $50. That's cheap. I read that the 4853 can be bored to LS1 style. Yeah, we do that a lot. Ever built a 387 Windsor? I don't know what that is. We built 392s, which is probably just the overbore of that. I've never built a stock display or stock bore size one because all the blocks that we had needed to go 30 over. But every stroker works, as a percentage. What cam would you recommend for a 6-liter with a 3000 stall? What are you trying to do with it? What intake manifold do you have? What cam do you have? Are you trying to drag race it? Are you trying to make lots of power? What heads do you have? All of that stuff. With a 3000 stall, you could put a pretty good sized cam in if that's what you want. Are you trying to make lots of power? Oh, you got a 67 Cougar? Yeah, we've done Stroker Clevelands before. We did a 383, I think, with that. Trying to make the most power without going to another stall. But do you have ported heads on it? Do you have a good intake manifold? What are you trying to do with it? Because if you put a really big camshaft in it, or the biggest cam you could fit with stock piston and valve clearance, depending on what heads you have on there, but you have a stock truck intake manifold on there and stock heads on there, like 706 heads or something, or even 317 heads, you're just not going to be able to take advantage of what the big cam has to offer. Excuse me. One more minute. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. New to the truck world, yeah, you have I'm gonna find a good mechanic. I don't know about mechanics though. Basically stock 6-liter 317 heads, new body style, intake, and headers. Okay. So you should look at a BTR hot rod cam or a red hot cam probably. The comp 54-459 or 469-11, those are also good. The Summit stage 4 cam is good for that. There's lots of good ones that will make good power. And on that note, it is time to go. But hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll see you guys all tonight.